So interesting mix, call handle time going down, customer-centered measures going up. Brilliant, fantastic. That's the measure space. I will stop talking about it because I can spend years talking about measures. Channels. Well, this is kind of what today's about. And I think one of the very interesting things is, as customers, in the customer research that we've done, we've got lots of channels as customers. We've got so much choice. So we've got all these channels on the radar. And the frank thing around omni-channel behaviour is that we're not using just one channel anymore. We are literally skipping around. It's not entirely surprising, frankly, because as customers, we're goal-directed. We go to the channel that we think is going to get us to our goal. If it doesn't get us to our goal, we move channels. And then we move channels again if that fails. So it's actually very natural human behaviour, because we have lots of channel choices now to move from the phone to email to social media. And obviously that's the traditional challenge of, we're getting more of this behaviour, how do we connect those channels together? If we ask about channels from consumers' perspective, typically the phone still comes out pretty high. In this survey, I was quite surprised that remember, this is contact centre operations managers, contact centre strategists. They actually think that web chat in 2020 will have overtaken the phone. Now, I'm not sure that's going to be true. I do think web chat's going to give a huge run it's going to give the phone a run for its money, frankly, because it has a lot of things going for it that points towards growth. Now, although the phone is a very accessible channel, we can have a conversation, wait times are still problematic, and we still have the contact centre experience to navigate, the very traditional contact centre. And even that's the perception, oh God, I'm going to have to ring them, in customers' minds. So the phone has a lot going for it. It's a very versatile channel. It's obviously old, a bit boring. You don't get conferences necessarily on how exciting the phone is, but certainly web chat is a good alternative. Now, the reasons why we think web chat, and my money's on web chat, frankly, is a growth channel. We're seeing it growing gradually, and certainly in the UK, it's had a bit of a growth spurt over the past 18 months. The reason is obvious. A lot of us start online now. A lot of us have smartphones. So actually, rather than having to come off that digital experience, it's often far, far easier to push a button and get through to a knowledgeable person. You still need the skills at the back, by the way. Can't just route it to any old person. But having a knowledgeable person at the end of a chat can be far more effective than necessarily some of the other channels, particularly email, which I have it in for. I describe email generally as a slow tennis match. So email's dropped right to the bottom now, and we're certainly seeing it start to plummet a little bit. Now, email, when managed badly, you know, we've all done it. We hit an email in. Oh, I got one back. I don't understand it. I'm going to hit another one in. Now, managed badly, that can take weeks to sort out. At least with chat and the phone, you've got a conversation going. So email, we're also seeing, if we ask by age, certainly if we break things like down our demographics on our customer data, ask an average teenager about email, you will get a roll of the eyes. So last year. Why would you use email? In actual fact, the evidence is from their behaviour is they have email addresses. They only sign up to email, though, because they can't get on Instagram or Facebook without an email address. So they're using it almost as identity management rather than necessarily communication. That's not saying that email is going to die immediately. Some futurologists are predicting the imminent demise of email. It has its uses. It's a brilliant information tool for a start, and you don't have to be available when it comes in. So there are certainly strengths, but we're seeing email drop to the bottom of the pile. Now, chat, I think, has, I mean, you're going to get a lot on chat today, I suspect, anyway, but I think chat has a number of advantages over a lot of the other channels. As I said, it's easy. Actually, if we rank our easy scores in BT on channels, I have to say we've looked at easy for 2 years now, and we've ranked our channels on easy scores. And the one that comes out consistently, number one, is chat. So customers find it easy because they start online. We also know on the flip side, the contact centre advisors dealing with chat also quite like it because it's a lot less isolating than the phone. You can yell across a room if you are co-located and go, oi, anyone know about this problem? I've just got a few in about it. So you can do that without putting the customer on hold, which is always embarrassing. So that on hold process, the chatting about the weather because the systems are slow, all of that the agents don't have to do with web chat. And of course the economics often adds up. So a lot of talk around transaction cost. If you want to talk about that, I have seen up to 10 simultaneous concurrent web chats into agents. I was in China last year. That scared the pants off me because frankly that isn't going to work. 2 to 3 concurrent chat sessions is, I suspect. And as you get more complex stuff in, you might want to drop that number. But chat economically works as well. So we've got customer pull, they think it's easy, they start online. We've got agent pull, they quite like the non-isolating nature of it. And you've got the finance as well, the fact that you can have concurrency potentially makes it a whole load cheaper than email, actually. Again, depends how you manage it, but certainly it has economic advantages potentially over the phone. Now, interestingly enough, when we look at our customer data, when we look at smartphone users, typically what we find is they get more omni-channel. So again, we're not looking at any of these channels in isolation, but they use more channels statistically than any other customer. So you will have to handle people doing maybe a chat from an app. You will have to handle people who are darting from app to web chat to then phone call. You will have to do that. So we can't handle these channels in isolation anymore. We have to tie them together because otherwise we get the old transfer problem that actually BT used to be famed for, the whole BT shuffle, the BT shunt, where you get passed from one channel to another because that agent can only do email or chats. They can't do phone. So how do we start to integrate all of these channels into the contact center? Because the likelihood is they're all going to be important as we go into the future. This was a controversial one. I was slightly disappointed, and I would say that one of the things, the biases in the data that we found on this particular question was definitely there. So bear in mind, contact center managers, we asked them, did they think, because we all think contact center, we think massive warehouses and, you know, like the battery farm type contact center. Does it need to be like that? Does it make sense? Now, actually, nearly 50% said yes, it does make sense to do that. Bearing in mind, it's easier to manage people who are co-located, so hence bias in data. Because I think these guys say, well, it's easier to manage that. I want an easy life. Let's have a dedicated centre. Plus, of course, most of us have dedicated centres already. We've invested in the infrastructure. So we can't blow it up immediately. 5 years is not a very long time period here. Having said that, we are starting to see a real mixture come out in terms of location. So we've got lots of options because technology untethers us. So we've got stuff like integrated hubs I describe as, they're not contact centres, they're offices, they have a locked door. You can have people dealing with customers' inquiries in there if you want the locked door. Frankly, they're not a dedicated contact centre resource. So integrated hub is kind of an office-based contact centre, could be a branch. Doing quite a lot with banks, they like locked doors at the moment, so bring them into a branch. That's an integrated hub. Then we've got a mixture of things like field-based and home-based advisors. Now, home-based, to be honest, one of my worst predictions in the past 5 years, because I don't have a crystal ball, was around the growth of home-based advisors. And frankly, in the UK, actually across Europe, we've not seen it. Why? Because it's growing massively in the US. And I think one of the issues is, to be a home-based advisor, you need one incredibly critical thing, a home. Now, think who we often recruit into contact centres. We often recruit 16, 18-year-olds. They often either don't have a home or they live with their parents. No wonder they want to get out of the house. So often we don't recruit the right people to do home-based agent work. Plus, there's lots of arguments around actually people do quite like the contact centre environment. And that is true. We are social creatures. But certainly home-based advisors, we know from the data, certainly that BT's had and a lot of other customers that we work with has, is that you can recruit differently. You can recruit people for anti-social hours. You can do things like split shifts because they don't have a commute. You can use them on multiple channels. So all of these things potentially add up to home-based still growing. Culture, however, And the management challenge often dictates that often we don't see the growth yet in the home-based one. Field and mobile is an interesting one though. If you are looking at speed dating a customer, complex problem, actually sometimes the person closest to that problem can answer the question. And frankly, again, I'll talk about technology in a second, but because technology has untethered us, actually why not have field-based agents if they actually have the right information for customers, and again across multiple channels. Doesn't have to be the phone, they could be using chat, they could be using email, it doesn't matter, they are field agents. We could actually incorporate these guys into our network of expertise because they have the right expertise to deal with customers. So I think the future is mixed. We still have a lot of infrastructure we've actually invested in, so we're not going to just throw it away. But we've got an interesting mixture of options as we go into the future. Obviously, technology has a huge part to play in this. And we did ask questions about the key technologies that people thought that would be significant into the future. Do you know, this was not entirely surprising, this mix. Now, the first thing to say is the obvious one for contact center is the fact that skills-based routing has to be right. The speed dating process. I believe my technical colleagues in BT now call this precision routing. So this is all about, and it doesn't matter what channel you're using. It could be phone, it could be social media, it could be email. It's all about speed dating the customer with the expert who can actually deal with the problem rather than a lovely person who has no clue. So it's not surprising that that speed dating process in terms of the underlying technology is the key one. The next thing is we were quite surprised that big data and cloud came relatively low. I mean, there was interest in it. And I think, again, look at the people that answered the questionnaire. They have been bombarded by a whole load of stuff about cloud and a whole load of stuff about big data, some of which is quite high P. I must admit, as a psychologist, it took me a while to get my head around cloud. I thought they were things in the sky. But actually, when you do understand the technologies, and it took me a while, it does actually offer a number of opportunities to change the model for the contact center. So I talked about demand earlier. Big data can let you understand your demand. So not just take lots and lots of calls really, really fast, but actually understand what those calls are and actually then make a decision. Do I need to proactively do something to deflect these calls through, again, multiple channels? So big data gives you access to the customer and the demand that the customer is placing on you. Cloud gives you access to anyone who's got a browser and a connection, frankly. So that network of expertise you don't need to fix anymore. And you don't need to make a huge amount of investment to actually switch more and more networked experts on. We're working with a utilities company in Australia at the moment where they don't necessarily have assigned customer service advisors. They have a certain number of them. But actually, if we think about it, utilities companies, you don't ring your utilities company to have a conversation with them, you know, say, hey, it's a lovely day. You generally ring your utility because there's been hugely bad weather and you don't have electricity or water. So they get, you know, this huge volume hike. Hence, cloud, we can start to turn people on across the business who aren't necessarily assigned to the contact center, but we can give them the right training and the right information to actually start to respond when required to customers' demands. So it gives us flexibility in the system. Agent, web chat, mobile technologies were interesting. Now, mobile technologies came up very strongly, and I asked why, because people were saying they still had a dedicated contact center resource. Actually, that was more around the fact that, well, firstly, customers are more mobile, therefore we need to think mobile. We need to think smartphone, we need to think app when we're actually creating things within the contact center. But also the fact that, again, you remember that tablet, that original vision, actually enabling people to be able to walk around, be a little bit more flexible, managers to actually manage by walking around using things like mobile technologies. And within contact center web chat, I think it really does work for agents as well. So again, if you have networks of experts, you can start to ask questions within the contact center as to what's going on. We left the last question, given that this was an audience primarily of contact center managers and operations directors and strategists, we asked that this is the most biased question of the lot, frankly. So we asked them what they thought they would be doing in 2020. And frankly, this was the one that had the most overwhelming stat attached to it. So overwhelmingly, these guys said, we are going to be super managers. We are going to have our underpants on over our trousers. We are going to leap tall buildings because we are going to be the guardians of the customer experience. That's fantastic. But it's not what they do at the moment, largely. Now, it has to be said that mostly these things, quality auditor, accountant, guru and coach, is what operations managers in contact centres typically do on a day-to-day basis. So I've always said I get very frustrated. I walk into a contact centre manager's office. I say, how many calls, how many contacts have you handled today? They know. How long were they? They know. What were they about? I don't really know. I'll go and ask. Again, that big data piece starts to come in. They need different tools. They need to understand that demand and in as real time as possible and start to respond to it. Because actually, largely, it's not the contact centre's fault that that demand is there. Billing has sent a stupid bill out. The website's down. Something has gone wrong. Frankly, certainly if the website's down, the first thing the manager needs to do is call the website guys and go, guys, did you know the website's down? We're getting a lot of calls. You didn't. Okay. So you need to find out what that problem is, and you need to tell me when you think that's going to be fixed, because I need to manage that expectation with the customer. That's often not what they do at the moment. So they don't necessarily stick their hands up and go, oi, rest of organisation, marketing guys, did you forget to tell us there was a marketing campaign on? Oh, yeah, that's a regular one, to be honest. So marketing don't tell people there's a problem, the contact centre gets flooded, they don't know anything about it. So again, how do we connect those loops together? Now, the other thing about being the customer experience guardian is they can't just do that on their own. They do need high-level support on this. And actually, from a strategy position, we are starting to see a lot of organisations. Actually, I was in South Africa about 4 or 5 months ago with an incredible organisation that really put their contact centre in the heart of their strategy. So they really understood what their customers were talking about. They plugged their product line into the contact centre to get the up-to-date information, not just a market research survey, what customers are saying about their products and services. Their CEO regularly went in and listened to calls as well to take the temperature of the customer. So they were using the contact centre as a strategic resource to understand their customers better. And frankly, that's what you need in order for these guys to become customer experience guardians. You need the CEO to appreciate the contact centre as a strategic resource rather than something that is a cost reduction thing, which sadly, again, a symptom of the carpets not being changed sometimes. Often the contact centre is seen as a cost to be reduced. I think enlightened CEOs are starting to see it as something very, very different, a value add that's dealing with a significant amount of complexity and actually starts to understand and guard that customer experience. But that's a very, very different role than we have today. So, interesting, I think, at the moment is the word I would use for this industry. I think we're in quite an exciting or maybe a challenging period. So we have these autonomous omni-channel customers hitting us with all sorts of channels, including really challenging ones like social media, which I didn't mention, actually, I should have done. Just done a study on social media, by the way. 70% of customers expect a response within 15 minutes, not 15 seconds, that would be very challenging. Within 15 minutes, they don't just want sorry, they want their problem solved. So again, it's accelerating as a channel into the contact centre. It's a particularly problematic channel. It's a very public channel. It's very nice to pull people into a private channel like web chat. Another reason why web chat is probably going to grow, but we're going to be the hub of these channels, social media. I was at a conference last week arguing who should own social media. Should it be the contact centre? Should it be customer service? Should it be marketing? Should it be PR? I think probably the answer is all of the above, but you could argue that for a lot of other channels as well. So we're becoming a hub, a relationship hub for all of these channels with really skilled people based, well, you can scale them up, you can scale them down. They're not tethered anymore. It's blurring the lines between front and back office, and certainly channels like social media are really challenging that distinction. I did a blog, actually, it was about 2 years ago, that was originally called, Is Your Back End Now Your Front End? it got censored. It got called something really boring. But that kind of melding between that front and back office function is happening because we're getting this complexity in. So it's less about dealing with lots and lots of calls really, really fast. It's more around getting the right person to talk to the customer, take the problem on, solve the problem, and actually, regardless of channel, speed date. Now, that's a bit of a revolution, but if we then look at the AI, the rise of the robots, which I am at the moment, we could actually see quite a bleak future for the contact centre because it won't be there at all. We'll just have automation, intelligent automation, automation that learns, but automation that probably doesn't really get empathy or care. So I think actually the opportunity here is, yes, we can't stop the rise of the robots, and actually the rise of the robots takes a lot of the basic transactional stuff out, which is good. It leaves our humans to do the really challenging stuff, the really emotive stuff, the really complex stuff. And that is one of the reasons why, if the contact center wants to actually emerge into the future as this relationship hub, it probably needs to change quite a lot strategically and along a lot of the lines that I've talked about. So that is quite an interesting challenge, I think, as we go into the future. It isn't just about the channels, it's about the skills, it's about how we locate the contact center. If you do want access to the research, very, very happy to share Super Agent 2020 with you. I can't talk a lot about the new research, but if you do follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn or follow my blog, we'll be making some noises about the new research, I suspect, in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So do watch this space. It's a very interesting piece of research, and some aspects of it slightly scare the pants off me because we're doing weird stuff as consumers. We are being disruptive. How do we disrupt back as an industry? Thank you for listening.